Hello everyone, and welcome to this video where we will be extending our micro framework from last video to include support for middlewares. This will allow us to intercept requests and run some code before passing it along to our route handler. Let's check out how this new feature can be used. Here in the main.ts file, we're showing how a developer would interact with our framework. The only thing that changed in this video is the addition of the server.middleware.use. This allows us to define different middlewares. In this example, we have two middlewares defined. One that simply console logs every request that our server receives. So it console logs the request.url. The other one kind of simulates an authentication middleware. It looks for a header field called secret. If this field does not exist or isn't equal to my secret, it will return a 404 unauthenticated response. Otherwise, it simply succeeds. Whenever a middleware returns a response, it will stop any following execution, so no other middleware or even the routing handler would get executed since this middleware returned the response for us. Let's test it out. We have our server running in the console on port 8080, and we can use Postman to try and make requests to our different routes that are defined here. So testing out just the root route. Whenever we make a request, if we pass a header with a secret key and my secret value, whenever we make the call, we should see the hello world response, and in our console we should see that the request was successfully logged. If we change my secret to something else and try and send a request, we should now receive unauthenticated. We will still get the request logged to our console since the auth middleware is defined after our console log middleware, our logging middleware. So if we were to switch places with them, the console log middleware would never be called since we failed the authentication. If we completely omit the secret header and try and make a request, we would still get unauthenticated. I'm back here into our VS Code for our Deno micro framework, and to be able to add this new middleware feature in our framework, we'll need to do a little bit of refactoring first. Inside of the router file, at the bottom for our function handle request, I will move this into our server file. So I will just remove this, and inside of our server file, after server HTTP, we'll simply add a private async handle request. We'll also need to make sure that the find matching route and the extract params are set to public. So we can update that to public, and this one as well. Hit save. Now we'll make sure to call the router dot find matching route as well as router dot extract param. Now we still have some issues with the context. That's because we're not exporting it. So at the top of my file, we can simply add export to our interface. We'll also export our routing handler since we'll need it later on. So I'll add export to this. And let's make sure to import it at the top alongside our router. And here we can remove this router handle request, which no longer exists, and simply make use of our new private handle request. Another refactoring change that we'll make here is instead of passing the request event to the handle request, we'll simply create the context here first with an empty key value pair for params and pass that along to our handle request. So here we'll update this to receive a context. And to fix these, we'll simply use context.request to get the method, and similar for the URL, context.request for the URL. This can be changed to request : context.request. Actually, we don't need to create a new context here. All we need to do is change the param for our initial context. So context.param will now equal to this router dot extract params, and we can get rid of this context. Great, so that's all the refactoring that we needed. We've updated our router file and our server file. Now to add the middleware logic, we can create a new file under our framework folder called middleware.ts. First, we'll start with importing the context and route handler from the router module. Then we'll export our new middleware type. It's essentially the same thing as the route handler. There's multiple ways of representing a middleware, but at this point, the simplest is to have it return a promise of a response or void. If the response is void, it means we execute the next middleware in the list until we run out of middlewares to execute, and then we finally execute the route handler. If we return a response, this will short circuit everything, and we will emit that response for the current request. Then we export our wrapper class. We'll store our middlewares as a list that is initialized to empty. We create a function called use, which takes a middleware and adds it to our list. Finally, we have our run middlewares function. This takes care of executing all our middlewares one by one. So the order that they're added matters. It takes in the context and the route handler. The route handler would be the logic to execute once all the middlewares are done executing. We also return a promise of a response. We'll basically iterate over our middlewares and run them. So we create an index that starts at 0. We'll use a while loop to iterate over the length of our middleware list as long as the index is smaller than it. We'll get the current middleware and increment our index by 1. We then run the middleware and get back the result from it. Now the result can be either void or a response. So we will check if we actually have a valid response. Then we stop everything and we just return that response. Otherwise, after our while loop concluded, we would run our handler by passing it the context. So we're almost done with our changes. We now need to make use of this new class inside of our server file. So if we head over to our server.ts file at the top, under our router initialization, we can initialize a new middleware wrapper. We make sure to add the missing import. And if we head to the bottom of our file, in our handle request function, instead of using the match routes handler directly, we can now make use of our middleware wrapper and replace this with the run middlewares function, passing it the context and the matched routes handler, which will be the default execution once all the middlewares are done executing. So we can now hit save and head over to our main.ts file, which shows us how to make use of our framework, and let's try adding some middlewares to our server. So I'll copy paste here the examples from the beginning of the video, and we'll simply flip it to make sure that the console, the logging middleware, doesn't execute if the auth middleware fails. Now let's start this server. So in our console, Deno task dev, which will run the main file, allow everything, and we should see we're running on localhost port 8080. And in our Postman, we can make a request to get me in Postman and pass it a name. If we hit send, we should see unauthenticated and nothing logged to our console. Now, if we stop it and just flip it, and start our server again, if we make another call, we should see something being logged in. Get me, John. Great. And now if we try and add my secret 123, should still fail. If we change that to my secret, it should now work. This completes adding this new feature to our micro framework. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye.